Okay, here we are for the latest live stream. All right, let me do this, put this here, put that there. Okay, so I'll put this off to the side, open this up, and let me know if you guys can hear me. Hopefully this works. I'm trying to do it on my desktop again. I probably just jinxed myself. I'm using a different camera that so far in tests worked, but I don't know. I'll just say that from the beginning. If there is some minor flickering, I apologize. It's mostly supposed to be an audio experience. And if that happens, I'll just keep troubleshooting. But honestly, there's been some weird combo with cameras that's made me use it on my laptop for the past few months. That's why you've seen me in weird locations all over my house. But right now it seems to work. And again, if there's a flicker here and there, try to bear with me and ignore it. I'll just note if it's any worse than the previous camera I used to use from my desktop. Okay. Let's see. And if you are in the Moore's Law said Discord, please let me know if you can hear me well. It's kind of a way that I screen it. If a patron tells me they can hear me fine, it's probably telling me the truth. All right, then. Let's see. Just give it maybe 10 seconds for. All right, audio's good. Everything looks like it's working. Fingers crossed that the YouTube lords don't screw me over on this one. All right, let's get into it. So this is the February loose ends. This is where I do a live stream with all of you, and you can ask me anything. Usually I have, I don't know, let's say 3 or 4 subjects in mind to talk about ahead of time. There's never a slow loose ends. And then, of course, I also answer questions from patrons for free. If you support me on Patreon, which you couldn't do this without our patrons, you able to submit questions ahead of time that I answer. Then also, if you tip me in the live chat, I will try to answer those questions as quickly as possible too. And again, unlike what I used to do last year, there's no waiting. If you have a question, feel free to tip me and I'll get to it as quickly as possible. Otherwise, I will just go through the pre-prepared questions from the patrons and jump back and forth as we go and just try to get through all of them. So I guess, the first thing I will do, though, before I get into the questions here, since I don't see any tipped questions yet, is that this Loose Ends is sponsored by Micro Center. They have a new exclusive for you guys. If you go to the description of this live stream and click on the link, that really does help the channel a lot. And they're giving you an extra $50 off of CPUs on the list. I think one of them is the Alder Lake i7 12700K. They've got 8 Ryzen processors in there as well. And you get $20 off a motherboard, $50 off the processor. So yeah, I mean, even if you don't get anything, it helps the channel if you click that link. And if you have a Micro Center even remotely near you, honestly, I've considered driving to Atlanta to build a new system because the cost of gas is less than how much cheaper their CPUs and motherboards are. And they usually have GPUs in stock for a lower price than online as well. So again, sponsored by Micro Center. Click the link in the description to get CPUs for cheaper than they're already cheap at Micro Center. Again, everyone should be using Micro Center if they can. But let's get into it. I don't see any tips questions, so I'll just start getting into the patron questions here. All right, so let me put a timestamp down. Okay. So I'm just going to get these ones out of the way first. They're Elden Ring related kind of questions. Elden Ring comes out, I'm in the US, so it comes out in like 8 hours for me. For the rest of the world, I know there's already people playing it. Gerard, audio editor for Moore's Law is Dead, has already been talking back and forth with me. We're planning out the next recording of Broken Silicon to minimize work time so we can both play Elden Ring a lot this weekend. But let me get into it. So Alex writes in, just like you guys can if you support us on Patreon. He asks, you like Dark Souls games. Are you keeping an eye on Elden Ring reviews? Who do you go to for taking reviews? Honestly, I don't pre-order a lot of games, so I don't have like a set review I have to go to that often anymore. I checked out the IGN review. I checked out the Metacritic review. I don't look at Metacritic as like some end all be all, but I think I take it as one person's opinion, right? So if I were to ask one of my best friends what their opinion of a game is, and then I'd ask my brother, and then I might ask someone else that I know that I respect, Metacritic would be one of those 4 people. It's not the end all be all. I don't get a game based on if it's a thumbs up or thumbs down from Metacritic. But I'd say it's one person's decent opinion, and I'd say the Elden Ring reviews are insane, and I'm really, really excited. Um, The Remedy writes in and he says, "What's your favorite From Software game of all time, and why is it Elden Ring?" Well, I haven't played Elden Ring yet, so I cannot say that. I cannot say that it's my favorite yet, but I have a suspicion it will be. But before I say which one's my favorite, let me be very clear about something here. I like all of Miyazaki's games. Like, there isn't one I haven't liked, and I have gotten all the achievements or platinums, depending on the platform I played it on, of multiple of his games multiple times. I platinum Demon Souls 3 times, for example. That's when I've done the most. I've gotten all the achievements in Dark Souls. So if I'm critical of them, it's not because I don't get it or I don't like them. I've really mastered a lot of these games. I'm just saying which one's my favorite up until now. It's funny, it used to kinda be Dark Souls, but me and Dan went back and played Dark Souls, and I've gotta say that I think Demon Souls just aged better, especially if you're playing the remake because obviously the original barely runs. But, I mean, there's just something about the bosses, the balancing of the PvP, backstabs aren't as cheap. Demon Souls and Bloodborne are kind of my favorites, and I've been playing Dark Souls 3 again, and that's up there too. Those are my 3 favorites. Those 3, and I think that's pretty easy for me to say at this point, actually. Elden Ring, I suspect, will be my favorite one, though, but let's not dwell on that. We're gotta talk about RDNA 3 soon. Balto writes in, "What do you think of the newly upcoming game Elden Ring? From what we know so far, the consoles are struggling to hit 60 frames per second, even on performance mode, though I personally think is by far one of the best looking games that exists as of now." Um, so I can't speak to all platforms, or should I say, I think to say it performs badly is you're focusing on one of them. Seems like the PS5 version runs well. It actually seems like the Xbox Series S version runs pretty well for a Series S game, that they didn't get over enthusiastic with the resolution they targeted. On PC, most of these From Software games don't run that optimized at launch. Heck, they don't even support above 60 hertz at launch. So I don't know what to say. This isn't, I don't even, I'm not even sure what dev to say anymore because so many recent PC releases have been botched. But what I will say is, it seems like it performs about what a From Software game does half of the time at launch, and it'll probably be patched. I know that the Series X version performs like 10 to 20% worse than the PS5 version. I'm not sure why. Maybe they were too optimistic about the resolution for their programming, or who knows what they need to lower. But I suspect, and I've heard there was a day one patch to improve it. I would suspect most of these will be patched and fixed as time goes on. But From Software isn't known for their technical prowess. So, I mean, Bloodborne, I was just thinking this. They've patched Dark Souls 3 for performance modes on, I think, on the PS4 Pro and the Series X, kind of. And I know I said Pro and Series X. It's complicated. They still haven't patched Bloodborne for some reason, even though Dark Souls 3 came out after it. I don't know what's going on with From Software's technical whatever, but it seems to run fine on the PS5. It seems like actually the last gen versions run fine if you accept 30 frames, which you should if you're on last gen. They're just 30 hertz consoles. Um, Everything else, it's hard for me to say because they've never been known for their technical prowess anyways. But I'm dwelling on this. Alex writes in, "Do you have any interest in playing Horizon Forbidden West?" Yes, but I knew that there was no point to me getting it for a week and then just playing Elden Ring for 5 months. So I haven't gotten it yet. And I'm not sure when I will. I like Horizon. I don't like it as much as like God of War or some of the other PlayStation 5 exclusives. One of my friends, it's one of his favorite games of all time. I'm not saying it's not good. It's just it doesn't hit as hard for me as a game like Elden Ring or something. All right, let me move in then here. That was an Elden Ring timestamp just to get them all out of the way, as it's Elden Day, of course. Um, I've got a few tipped questions. Let's get through those. So Kinahoon25 writes and he says, "Hey Tom, I'm a patron, but I wanted to give you $5 so Dan can buy a sandwich." Thank you. He does actually rely on the income from Moore's Law is Dead more than you might think because he's still in grad school. But it says, "But how do you feel about the sharp decline in mid-range GPU prices?" I guess let's put that there. Let's make that a timestamp, right? Price decreases. I like that. So, what do I think about the sharp decline in mid-range GPU prices? It's actually funny. If you go back to which Broken Silicon would it have been? I think if you go, yes. So the last Daniel Nenny Broken Silicon, which I don't remember exactly when it was. I think it was the second half of last year. He's the founder of semiwiki.com. Another excellent episode. Don't you if you've missed it, it aged well. It's not only talking about stuff from last year. It's very interesting talks about supply chains. I mean, this is stuff Daniel Nenny does for a living. It's like, advise and consult in the semiconductor industry. And a lot of that is involved consulting on issues with supply chain. So his input was invaluable to the channel. And I still reach out to him every now and then for opinions on things. I believe that I said in that episode, I thought prices would start getting better by quarter two of 2022, but they won't really be fixed probably until the end of this year. And even then, it's like, who's to say what fixed really means, right? Are we talking about mid-range GPUs being $300 again? I don't know. I think that's becoming a tall order due to inflation and continuing geopolitical issues all over the world. But what I will say is, you know, exactly how do I feel about the sharp decline? It's right on schedule. I mean, even some Nvidia sources were saying they expected prices to start going down in quarter two. I said that in a video as well. So, how quickly will they continue to accelerate down? I'm not sure, but I think you've got to think about some of these graphics cards and why they would command a given price. Now the 6500 XT is out and it is under $300, and I don't know. What's going on right now in Ukraine, that's going to affect oil prices, which affects shipping prices. So I don't know if they'll get below 200. But as much as I did report that the 6500 XT is, I don't know, how do you put it? Post day one price was somewhat fake, that AMD pays for an MSRP launch and then lets it go up in price without artificially keeping it down. But they still targeted that card once shipping costs goes down to be below 200. And it's always gonna be there. And as long as you have a 6500 XT gravitating below 200, that's gonna mean it's gonna be hard to justify a $400 6600. It's not worth twice as much money. It's worth a lot more, maybe 50% more, but not twice as much. And then once you have a 6600 getting below 400, well, it's hard to justify 6600 XT above 400. And then it's hard to justify 6700 XT above 500. So that's what's going on. I think the 6500 XT anchored pricing, you already saw at that launch, the 1650 pricing in the used market go down and 1050 Ti pricing go down. And then you're seeing shortages of leaving. And this is going to slowly have a trickle down effect. I think there will be some cards that just stay way above MSRP, but there are some cards that have pretty giant margins that are mostly inflated because of shipping. And that's mid-range to low-end cards. High-end cards, if shipping costs twice as much, whatever, it's a $1,000 card, it's still going to make a big profit. But mid-range cards are more affected by these shipping costs we're seeing. So these are going to be the first ones to go down in price. And I would say that that's why I have a problem with people recommending an RTX 3050 for $400. Pricing's gonna go down. I don't want to be the sucker that paid double MSRP. Just get whatever is the minimum you can live with. And then things are going to keep getting better from here on out. Will they be fixed? Not for a while, but they're going to keep getting better, right? So I guess that's what I would say about pricing right now, which I think is pretty full thought there. Let me put in this here: Arabian Prince, Raptor, or Meteor. I saw your question, Arabian Prince. I'm going to save it for later because there's a whole Intel section. Swirling Dragon Mist writes in, will AMD release more X3D chips like the 5800 X3D? I don't think so. I think all evidence is they're going to try to launch Zen 4 as soon as possible to fight Raptor Lake. And that if that's what they're going to do, it feels odd to launch a full lineup of X3D. Could they launch one more to slot into AM4? Maybe, but I find it highly unlikely there's a full lineup. So I just wouldn't hold out for that. It depends on the price. The 5800 X3D will be a good gaming upgrade, especially for someone who had like a 3600X or 2700X. A lot of people did, by the way. You'll like almost double IPC from like some of those Zen 1. You'll double IPC probably from Zen 1 if you had like a 1600. What an upgrade. But I'd still say it's still only worth waiting for the 5800 X3D or getting it if it's like under 350, because it's still a tall order at this point where Alder Lake is. But no, I don't think there will be more X3D chips really. And if there are, I wouldn't expect a full lineup. Yeah, I don't think so though, just in general. Gleb, thank you for the tip. Let's see. Florian Goring writes in, oh, maybe I'll put down a timestamp for this as well. TSMC 3 nanometer issues. What happened to TSMC's 3 nanometer? Is it delayed? And will Samsung's GAFET be a game changer for them to finally end TSMC's half a decade monopoly? Well, thanks for the tip. It's funny I brought up that last Daniel Nenny Broken Silicon. We talked about TSMC 3 nanometer, and not a year ago, but like half a year ago, Daniel Nenny said he's heard TSMC was having problems with 3 nanometers. If you listen to Broken Silicon, and that's a thing that I've been saying, not in like a big video where I warn people, but if you listen to Broken Silicons regularly, me and Dan have been saying every now and then, and I've heard TSMC 3 nanometers having issues. Do I know? I'm not look now. I'm not someone working on it, so I can't really give you more details than that. But so 5 nanometers, the end of this second half of this year, arguably before that, if you're Apple, of course. And then, yeah, I guess it wouldn't be surprising if 3 nanometer was like more of like a early 2024 thing than a late 2023. At this point, though, a lot of products are planning to use it. I don't even remember off the top of my head. I'd have to double check what I've heard Battle Mage is using. But the thing is, though, I've heard, and I think I reported this in my RDNA 4 early leak, that RDNA 4 is planned for the end of 2023 or early 2024. And that or suggests that they might be well aware 3 nanometer might be delayed, or that they might have to switch to 4 nanometer. So that's all I can say is that I can't give you a ton of details, but it is clear TSMC 3 nanometer is not as full steam ahead as 5 nanometer is, which their 5 nanometer has just been going perfectly. Thank you for the question, though. Let me see. Go down here. Remember to like everybody. I see 500 people on the stream. Remember, all right, let's try to get to 500 likes. How are the big three doing by performance per watt? I don't know. I guess I'll put this here in this timestamp, performance per watt. How are the big three doing by performance per watt? I mean, AMD's doing great. Intel's doing okay again, but AMD's still pretty much the efficiency champ overall. Undisputably, they're doing the best. Not that they always have the most efficient. They don't. Intel's a lot of efficient stuff again. But AMD's clearly the most efficient overall, I think. And Intel's doing okay. They're catching back up. They've still got some ground to make up in a lot of their areas. Nvidia isn't as inefficient all the time as you'd think. The 3070 is as efficient as your typical RDNA 2 card. And I tested an A4000, never got that out in a video because I was just too busy, unfortunately. I tested the A6000. A6000 was incredibly efficient. So was the A4000. All I can but the W6800, from what I'm seeing, is really efficient too. Probably a little close to A series, if not a little better than that efficiency. So I think Nvidia's efficiency isn't as bad as some people would say. I just think a lot of their dies are very imbalanced. And I think the decisions Nvidia's made for some of them have been, I don't know. Look, these companies have a lot of decisions to make. So they have their reasons for doing one thing or not doing another thing. But when you look at how efficient AMD's Rembrandt APU is compared to the upcoming MX500 CPU or GPUs, I mean, the MX550 is basically pointless. Like, it's weaker probably than Rembrandt, or it is weaker than Rembrandt, and it uses its own energy. And why is that? Well, it's on a 12 nanometer node with a card that was, I think, around 200 millimeters squared. The 1650, I believe, is, or something around there. Like, so if you think about it, the original MX150, the original MX 250 used GP 108. No, 108, I believe so. And GP 108 was like a 100 around there, like I think 80 or 100 millimeter square die with just a 64-bit bus, meant to be that size. And ever since then, Nvidia's neglected doing that again. They've just been disabling their basically 1050, 3050 dies to make MX card, 1650 dies to make MX cards. There's latent silicon and it's not as efficient. And these little bundled graphics cards they put in there, they've really been cutting corners. They need to make a new entry level die that is truly entry level. Like GA107 is what is it? I think it's a die size around the let me look. I can look, right? I have time here. GA107 die size. I think we finally know, right? Because we didn't know for a while. Um, yeah, it's like it's a bigger die size than Navi 23, and Navi 23 makes a mockery of GA107. I know it's on a worse node, but still, you know, like disabling that all the way down to an MX570, which is what they're doing for the MX570. They're using a die around the size of Navi 23 for the MX570. It's not going to be as efficient as it could be if it was something else. And I think you see a lot of their products, like the GA102, just isn't as balanced as GA104. That's all I'm saying is NVIDIA's efficiency isn't as bad as you'd think. It's just a lot of their dies and segmentation aren't really focused at being as efficient as I think they could be. All right. I think I probably talked about that longer than I intended to. So let's move on. Let's see. Cannon West writes in, how is AMD going to compete in gaming CPUs? Intel is back with rapid release cycles, while AMD has a long 1.5-year set of cycles. I guess I'll put a timestamp down here. So we got 21 minutes. AMD gaming compete. All right. So how's AMD going to compete in gaming CPUs? I mean, they are, guys. I know Alder Lake, it's the newest release. Alder Lake is doing well. It's what I would recommend to most people building a new system. Again, unless you already have AM4, then of course not. Or you get a good deal. I mean, but what? AMD is behind Intel in gaming 10%, 20%, depending on the game. That's not that far behind. We're not talking about Vega versus the Titan. They're not as far behind as you'd think. And AMD's Zen 3 is, when did that even come out? I have to remember off the top of my head here. Wasn't that 2020, right? Wasn't it 2020? Yeah, I think, yeah, 2020. So AMD is in a year and a half old lineup that's a little weaker than Intel's and is more efficient in some scenarios. It's just AMD isn't having trouble competing, in my opinion. And they'll have Zen 4 out soon, and Zen 4, I think, is being underestimated for gaming. That's the funny thing, is I think people are overestimating Raptor Lake's chances of winning gaming and underestimating AMD's. It's not to say that I don't think Raptor Lake could win. I think it's going to be an interesting fight again here. But AMD's shown off Zen 4 running all cores above 5 gigahertz. Now, some people would go, well, they've already got 5 gigahertz CPUs with, well, yeah, I mean, with Rembrandt, with Zen 3 Plus, that can hit 5 gigahertz. And you can get some Zen 3 samples on desktop to 5 gigahertz. But that's misleading. They're not hitting 5 gigahertz on all cores. Zen 3 is like, 1 or 2 did briefly. You blinked, it hit 5 gigahertz. The rest are generally around 4.5 gigahertz. So if AMD shows off Zen 4 running all cores above 5 gigahertz, which they did, then I'm forced to conclude that's not just like a 2% increase in clock speed. That's like all cores in gaming. It could be effectively, and we don't even know what it was boosting to. Were they all just boosting to 5.1? Were some at 5 and others at 5.4 gigahertz? Because I've heard that's possible from some people working at AMD, that they're not sure what the final clock speeds are yet, but that Zen 5 could hit not 5.2, not 5.3, 5.4, maybe even 5.5. I'm not confirming that. I'm just saying. But what we know officially from that demonstration at CES is Lisa Su showed Zen 4 hitting all of its cores above 5 gigahertz. And I say that's a 10% speed increase about. And I have confirmed that Zen 4 will be at least a 20% IPC increase. So you're looking at a 30% IPC, a 30% single threaded increase, probably from where they are now at least. And it could be 40. All right. So to me, that means it's going to beat Alder Lake by at least 10%, maybe 15% in gaming. And then you bring out Raptor Lake, it's going to be close. How is AMD going to compete with Intel in gaming? I don't think they are not going to be able to. I think Intel may be in charge most of the time, but by what? 5%? Who cares? They're going to be trading blows, guys, at everything. Multi-threading, single-threading gaming moving forward. And as for how does AMD compete with Intel's rapid cycle, I already confirmed this, I believe, in a recent video. Yeah, the one that I said Zen 4 versus Raptor Lake and Meteor Lake. Watch that video that came out a week ago. I've already reported that Zen 5 should follow about a year after Zen 4 at most. That it could be like 10, 11 months. So this idea that AMD is not going to follow with rapid releases? Not true. And Zen 3 came out a year after Zen 2 about. So it's just Zen 4's taken a while, and a lot of that has to do with waiting for DDR5 to make sense for consumers, to be honest. But, once they get Zen 4 out, Zen 5 is actually supposed to be at least as big of a deal and come out much sooner. So I wouldn't sound the alarms that AMD can't compete yet, which I've just talked about it. I guess let me answer this tipped question now. So what was it? I think it was Arabian Prince or Adrian Prince or something. He asked, should I get Raptor Lake right away or wait for Meteor Lake? When are you upgrading? I don't think you should wait for anything if you need to build now. Alder Lake prices, especially again plugging it, if you use the link in the description, are cheap at Micro Center. Like you can get an i7 12700K for $300, I think, and then get $20 off a motherboard that comes with it. I think now's the time to build, and that will upgrade to Raptor Lake. But if you don't need it now, I don't need it now. I'm not building now. I have an Alder Lake i5 behind me. Can't actually see it right now, but here it is. I've got an Alder Lake i5 that I'm going to put in a test system. But that's for a test system now. I'm not waiting for Raptor Lake to build the test system. If you need something now, Alder Lake. If you're going to wait, Zen for a Raptor Lake. And then we'll just have to assess how good Meteor Lake is. But I think Meteor Lake comes to laptop first. So if you're doing desktop, which I assume you are from your question, I would say, Alder Lake now and just get the i5 and then upgrade to Raptor Lake. Or wait, get Zen for a Raptor Lake. Or if you don't need anything then, I keep saying this, great stuff is around the corner, every corner for the next 5 years. This is not, I got to build Sandy Bridge and wait 10 years so I can brag. I've got an i5 from 2010 still. Those days are gone. There's always something better coming now. And that's how it's supposed to be. Patreon giving a nice 1/4 of gas next week. Not sure what that means, Profuse Stuck, but thank you for the tip. Z-Salt Katona writes in, do you see any chance that AMD might lose their lucrative SoC business with a future console generation? And by lose, you mean Xbox or PlayStation doesn't go with AMD, right? I assume that's what you mean, right? Because right now, Nintendo's using Nvidia, so they're not losing it if they go with Nvidia again, really, right? No, I don't. I don't think the console manufacturers are going with anything else but AMD for a while. And it's not just because of like backwards compatibility, although that's definitely a thing, or their working relationship with AMD that's been built over decades now, which is also a thing. It's because they have no reason not to. It's easier to keep going with AMD if everything's equal, and everything's equal. Like again, AMD is not like losing to Intel right now. I haven't even released Zen 4 yet. All right, I've got a blank name here. Let me see. I don't know. It's someone saying they're Jensen Wang. I'm guessing I know which patron this is. That's saying, just reminding everyone how great Nvidia is. Okay, I guess if you want to pay a tip to remind people how good Nvidia is, I won't stop you. Josh W. writes in, hi, Tom. Have a blessed day. I have one question. When do you think the Alder Lake laptops are set to release into the market? The H, the P, and the U series? Well, they're releasing right now. So, I mean, what did my Alder Lake leak say? I mean, I can literally open that up. I think it's, I doubt that I have anything to change from that. Where is that Alder Lake? What do I call that? No. Oh, I think I've already deleted that folder and backed it up to my backup drive. But I mean, it's releasing about now. Really, you're going to see high volume next month, probably late next month. It's releasing now. It's just expect it to just by Q2 be decent options. Unless I missed something. I haven't really been paying attention to mobile Alder Lake that much, to be honest. Calvin Weaver writes in and he says, Tom, sorry to be off topic. Well, we'll see if I forgive you. I listen to you almost every day on my hour commute. You really are awesome. Thank you. I don't know if I agree, but I thank you for the compliment. How the heck do you survive with just 16 gigabytes with RAM, considering you're a gamer and a creator? It's not ever full. That's how, it gets close to full on some of my mega videos I work on, but for the most part, I'm at like 13 or 14 gigabytes. And unfortunately, or fortunately, really, the RAM I got in 2016 overclocked insanely well. I mean, I think I got it up to, it's at 3600 megahertz. I think if I'm saying it right, at CL14 or something ridiculous. Like it's like real low timings at real high speeds that I got for $65. God, is it already 6 years ago? 6 years ago. So it's hard for me to justify getting new RAM until I can get something better for less, which just about now I can, but it's not like that much better. But I am looking to maybe upgrade my RAM soon and just use that RAM for the benchmarking station. So, but how do I get by with it? It's still almost never an issue for me, is how. We 10. Who do you think will perform better in ray traced games? Most games that feature ray tracing also have DLSS. Yeah. FYI, FSR 1.0 doesn't meet my standards. Okay. I don't have many opinions on FSR since what I've said a while ago. I, to be fair, don't play the games I play on PC right now don't have FSR, and I use an Nvidia graphics card, so I can't force it through the drivers right now. But who do I think will perform better in ray traced games? I assume you mean next generation. I'd say next generation. I think it's gonna be close. That's all I can say right now. I think I'll leave it at that, though. All right, any other tipped ones? Let's see here. Matthew Johnson writes in, Gelsinger recently showed off a 20 angstrom IP test wafer at Intel's Investor Day and said they are on track to ramp 20A nodes in Q1 of 2024. Ugh, having trouble talking. Do you think by 2024 Intel might be back on top with their process technology? Um, I think, whatever happens, they'll be close to to AMD. They'll be close to TSMC. And I've said this in a recent Broken Silicon, but I'll put this down as a timestamp here. Intel process lead. So, do I think they'll be on top? If they are, it's going to be a narrow victory. I think it's too early to bet on Intel getting out. What, they're on Intel 7? Don't they have Intel 5 and Intel 3 before the 20A? So do I think they're going to release 4 new nodes in 2 years or 3 years? No, I don't, So I don't think, do I think by 2024 Intel will be back on top in process technology? No, but I would believe they might be close-ish again. I say 2026 is when you'd want to place your bets of it maybe happening. Space Channel 5 writes in, are we expecting APUs to take the bottom of the market, especially when the 6600 XT was due to be paired with a 6600G CPU? I assume you mean 6500 XT, which is true. 6500 XT was meant to be paired with Rembrandt or Alder Lake CPU. So, are we expecting APUs to take the bottom of the market? Yes, but I don't think it's gonna be a firm taking for another year or 2 still. Yeah, I don't, APUs low end. Let me put that there in the timestamp. I just, when I look at Rembrandt, I say, "Oh, it's almost twice," it's like whatever it is. I think, it's up for debate how you count it. It's like, let's say, 70 to 80 to 100% better than Cezanne, depending on the TDPs and what RAM you give both of them, somewhere around there. Like, is that impressive? I guess, but Cezanne used the same 8 Vega compute units from Renoir from 2018. So, do I think it's impressive? Wait, 28, was it 2018 or is that 2019? I think 2019. Yeah, so do I think it's impressive that AMD has something twice as good as something they launched a few years ago? No. I think Rembrandt is putting more focus on the integrated graphics than Renoir did when it came out. But I don't think it's putting that much more. If AMD wanted to, you know, Rembrandt's a smaller die size than their earlier Zen 1 and Zen Plus APUs. If they wanted to, they could add some Infinity cache and 4 more compute units or something. If they wanted to, they could make it as strong as like a 580 or, well, probably not a 580, right? But well, it depends on the resolution and how fast the RAM is. They could make it much better, at least 30, 40, 50% better than what it is now by making the die size 30% bigger or something. But they're choosing not to. In fact, I almost wonder why AMD didn't make Rembrandt have only 8 compute units and then launch a version with just 6 cores and 16 compute units and 16 megabytes of infinity cache. Have 2 of them. For now, they seem hell bent on just having one APU for the most part they use for everything, and then they launch these little ones and rebrand, Lucian and Bartello and all those over and over again and again and again. So, as long as AMD keeps doing that, I don't see that as taking up the low end because, as much as people shit on the 6500 XT, and I've yet to test it myself, but of course I've read the reviews and, whatever. Like, the 6500 XT guys is like 50% better or something than Rembrandt. So, assuming it's in the proper system, of course, so even that weak card with a 100 millimeter square die manages to beat Rembrandt by that much. And that tells me they're skimping on the integrated graphics. As long as they skimp on them or try to make one APU that is kind of in between good at graphics and in between being a flagship CPU to be paired with a GPU and a laptop, that's not quite good enough to fill the low end. Like if they launch Rembrandt on desktop, which I think they, who knows if they will, I think they might. They launch that on desktop, even at higher clocks on desktop, you're looking at something that falls short of a 570. You know, and then how much are they going to charge for that? Because it has a really strong CPU. $300 is a $300 APU that's weaker than a 570, really filling the low end. Maybe because that is enough performance for a lot of recent games in 1080p low settings, and that's all a lot of people want. Sure, I'll hear that argument, but is it filling the low end in the way that other low end cards used to, like your HD 7770s and your like legendary 6670s? God, the days of like $100 graphics cards. It's not yet because it's 3 times the price of, it's just not quite there yet. I think it will be eventually, but I feel like that's almost going to have to be this like singularity point, inception point where APUs aren't as strong as we wish they were, but they're good enough that they run all games in 1080p at high settings anyway, so who cares? And I don't think that's really happening for another year or so. But eventually, I do think it will happen. I just wouldn't say it's going to happen now. And I talked about this in my early RDNA 4 leak, where I'm like, yeah, I think by RDNA 4 is when you're going to start seeing APUs fill the sub $300 market, but not yet. That's a couple years away. All right, I talked about that for quite some time, and I think I had another APU question. So yeah, let me just get right into that one right now. The Wilson 45 writes in from Patreon, and he says, with the advent of AMD Van Gogh, the Steam Deck Rembrandt, and future Intel architectures like Arrow Lake, which we've heard could have 384 execution units, where do you see mobile APUs in a few years' time? I the cop-out answer is wherever AMD wants them to be. By then, we'll have dense enough nodes, the right cache technologies, and fast enough RAM that they can make something really good. So if AMD wants to, they can make something, I mean, in a few years' time, so 2025. So what? Right before the PS6 comes out, they'll have APUs as strong as the PS5 for sure, probably stronger. You know, that's where we'll be. And I think that's when we will get into that inception point where I'm like, well, look, a low end $400 GPU is like 3 times stronger than this APU. But this APU can still game like a PS5, which is by then, I don't know what resolutions they'll be running games, but it's like still runs all games at 60 frames at 1080p or higher. Is that enough for most people? Maybe, I think that's going to be an interesting thing unless there's some seismic shift in how we program games, which there might be, with asset streaming, where it might just be enough for a lot of people. And but the asset streaming thing is, but will we just need new accelerators to stream in data from SSDs and the APU will lack it? I don't know. That's the real question there. But I mean, that's where we're going to be in terms of handhelds. You'll probably get some handhelds that can argue they're around a PS5 as well that use 20 watts in 3 years. Yeah, I think so. Now how much will those cost? We'll have to see though. And let me see here. I want to make sure I don't miss these questions. So let's see. Oh, there was one I missed. The Wargamer writes in, Wargamer2199 writes in, hi, Tom. Keep up the great work. I know it's still early, but who do you see taking the ultra performance crown in 2024? RDNA 4, Celestial, or Hopper? I don't believe Hopper is what that will be. And I don't remember what the likely name of the next Nvidia graphics card is. But who is going to take the crown between? Let's just get into this now. Then I'm going to start going through some of these other questions. So RDNA 4 versus Celestial. So, first of all, Celestial might not be out till after RDNA 4. Well, certainly it won't be actually. So it's really kind of Battle Mage versus RDNA 4. And my money's on RDNA 4 for sure. In terms of like if Celestial would come out half a year after RDNA 4 and then has a chance of taking the crown, I would say that's definitely plausible, but we're just getting a bit ahead of ourselves. I've reported on what Alchemist's targeted performance was over a year ago. In 20 what I mean, was it late? Yeah, late 2020, I was already reporting on 16 gigabytes, 512 execution units, aiming for 3070 Ti performance. You know, that has always been the plan. But at this point, we need to wait for these cards to come out and Intel has to prove it. Because my suspicion is the Alchemist launch is kind of going to be like, in some games, it's the 3070 Ti. In some games, it loses to a 3070, and it's going to take half a year of driver optimizations to really hit its full potential. They'll still price it accordingly, and it'll still be considered 3070 class. But that's kind of what I'm expecting. But we need to see this dang thing out. It's too early for me to say for sure what I think will win 3 years from now. It's just too far out. But what I'll say is they want to try to beat Lovelace with Battle Mage. But again, it comes out like a year after Battle Mage. So if that's impressive to you, is up to you. And they want Celestial to directly compete with whatever they have out at the time in the very top end. If they'll succeed, let's wait for Alchemist to come out before we make any bets on that. Let's see here. Answered that one. Answered that one. Answered that one. Hi, Tom. Do you think we're likely to see HDT Zen 4 Threadripper? Let me write that down as a timestamp. Threadripper. You think we're likely to see HDD Zen for Threadripper? Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I think, what did I say that was coming out? I think I expect it by quarter one-ish next year. Yeah, I think there'll be a Zen 4 Threadripper. It's a pretty, watch my Threadripper roadmap leak. I think I've done several videos talking about it. I did the video which laid out the roadmap where I'm like, it's kind of sketchy if anything's coming out in the next 6 months, but Zen 3 Threadripper, that was when I said Zen 3 Threadripper was supposed to come out, late 2021. And then I tweeted it's canceled. I think what you got to remember is if AMD wants to launch a Zen 3 or Zen 3D Threadripper, they can at any point this year. It will fit and work in the existing sockets. It's just up to them. And I wouldn't rule out that AMD decides to do a Zen 3D Threadripper limited release to try to make good on the Threadripper owners. But that's it. And I think it's going to be Zen 4 then. And because they've neglected Threadripper for so long, I think they kind of have to launch Zen 4 Threadripper. But the question is if that will be even considered HEDT anymore, if they'll just make it only workstation. Because there's an argument to be made that they should just beef up and like launch an X, what would it be called then? 6, because they're on 570 now. Like the analogous would be 590 or X690, X790. There's an argument they maybe should just make a higher end chipset for AM5 and then make Threadripper workstation only. Because I'm not really sure what the point of HEDT and Threadripper is. And workstation is with Threadripper when HEDT Threadripper is practically workstation already. It's just so good that it's basically workstation as an HEDT. So that's the one caveat I would say is, yeah, there's going to be a Zen 4 Threadripper, I believe, but I wouldn't rule out it just being workstation. And then they just make one higher end chipset on AM5 with a special edition higher core count for AM5 to kind of fill that HEDT void. Because that honestly makes more sense to me for them to do it that way, especially with how expensive Threadripper is getting. I mean, thousands of dollars for a CPU. You can probably afford a workstation, dude. All right, let me make sure I didn't miss any of those. All right, I've gotten through the tipped questions, so continue to keep asking those. But otherwise, let me start rolling through the questions submitted and the main points I wanted to make submitted from the patrons on Patreon. So first subject I want to talk about a bit is kind of just a recap on what's going on with Nvidia Lovelace. So first question from a patron. Again, you can ask for free if you support us. Kent Gain writes in light of new information over the last few months, do you still stand by RDNA 3 taking the crown from Lovelace? Do you foresee any complications with MCM, any Halo launches from Nvidia, especially Let me see. Sorry, I lost especially following these 850-watt rumors. So I've always heard, I think, right? I'd have to go really far back to see if I'm misremembering. I believe ever since I've really started talking about Lovelace, I've talked about it using a lot of energy. And I think my first proper Lovelace focused video was the Nintendo Switch 2 leak, or I called it the Super Switch. A lot of people tell me they don't like the name Super Switch. I thought Super Switch because of Super NES sounded more fun, but I don't know. Um, Sorry, my throat's dying all of a sudden because I've been talking already for 45 minutes straight. Like, I think in that video, though, I said it's monolithic and they expect it to use a lot of energy to get close to RDNA 3's performance. And I've always been basically told 400 to 500 watts. And I can believe that because there are 500-watt versions of the 3080 and 3090, and they do work with air cooling. So if they built one from the ground up, or at least did some extra tweaks to make it work better, I can see a 500-watt graphics card. Now, I think more likely what they'll do, as I said in my recent video addressing the 850-watt thing, is I think it's most likely Nvidia calls it 400 watts or 375 watts, 450 watts, but it bursts up to 500 watts and they require a 1000-watt power supply or something. You know, they don't. I wonder if they want to call it a 500-watt card when AMD's like, here's our 400-watt card that's stronger. But you never know, because I think AMD might push RDNA 3 really hard too, because they know they can take the crown. Um, so these rumors of 850 watts, though, what I'm saying is, to me, this tells me that if that's any validity to those test samples, which, that's probably for data center, or they're seeing what they can push it to and what the results are. But I don't think they're launching any 850-watt card to just barely win by 5%. I think that's just, as I said in my last video, a Pyrrhic victory. And I did reach out to a few sources. A couple of them got back to me right before I posted the video. A couple of them got back to me after I posted the video last night. And so half of them said that the 850-watt rumors are flat out bullshit. And this isn't me. I'm just reporting what they said. And the other half said that, oh, yeah, Lovelace is going to use way more energy, but 850 watts, there's almost no way that's the actual TDP. Power spikes to that? Sure, but that's not what I saw people reporting. It's so in other words, my overall opinion of Lovelace versus RDNA 3 hasn't really changed. And the reason for that is, if Nvidia pushes Lovelace, AMD can push RDNA 3, right? I think AMD's always basically been targeting 400 watts for the top card, but if Nvidia pushes their card to 500 watts, sure, whatever, Nvidia. AMD will push their card to 450 or 500 watts to get that extra 5%. The fact of the matter is AMD is confident they can roughly double performance, and if they push things, they can get a little bit above double. And that ray tracing will be more than double, as I've already said before in a few videos and podcasts. So I don't. Everyone I ask still thinks it's a tall order for Lovelace to double performance. That the real target was like 60 to 80% more, and I think that's something people need to understand here. When people see Nvidia pushing Lovelace really hard, and they go, "Oh, are they going to triple performance?" Again, you can believe me or not. Maybe I'll be wrong, but everything I've been told is the original target for Lovelace, not Lovelace was 60 to 80% above Ampere. So if they're getting to double, that's them pushing it hard. Like, there's only so much you can push something. So no, I stand by it. I think RDNA 3 is going to be comparable to RDNA 2 over RDNA 1. And I think Lovelace is going to be as close as they can get. But the one thing I will say is, and Stu writes in, so let's get to this one. Stu writes in from Patreon. Tom, are we close enough to the release of Lovelace and Navi 3X that you can give us an educated guess on comparable performance? What might that guess be? Oh, God, guys, I hope this isn't one thing you write articles about saying I'm doubling down on it. But I mean, this isn't I get it's an educated guess, but this isn't me putting any money on the line. I'm not even betting $20. I'm not a gambler. But you put a gun up to my head and I say, I think RDNA 3 is going to be like 110%, 120% stronger than RDNA 2 in certain high resolution scenarios, but low resolution lower than that. I think it's going to be almost Ampere like in that it's focused. You get the most gains at 4K or higher. And I think that its ray tracing will be 2.5 to 3x RDNA 2. And I think Lovelace is going to be about 2.5x the ray tracing of Ampere, and 1.9 times the performance, or maybe 2x the performance for like a special edition Ampere. And so what do you think that means? I'd say that means AMD wins by 10 to 20%. And that's what I think is going to happen. But we're going to have to see, because the one thing I will say, and I wrote this down in my notes for Stu here, Jensen's going to try to find a way to tie or pretend they have the crown. That's the one thing I have to say. Jensen Huang does not like losing. So what I just said is in rasterization with some caveats for ray tracing that I mentioned. I just think Nvidia is going to try to find a way to argue it's at least a tie, because they always do. I'm talking about Nvidia. Should I put the green lights on here for fun? They don't look that green. Whatever. Let me leave that on there. Well, that was short-lived though. Let me move over to the RDNA 3 question. So I'll switch to red, and let me put down a new timestamp here. 56 RDNA 3. So the Remedy writes in from Patreon, and he says, on a more serious note, Tom, I am not too familiar with the intricacies of MCM designs when it comes to GPUs, but wouldn't a major hurdle to overcome on this be latency? Yes. He goes on, I just keep harkening back to the dual GPU single cards of yesteryear, and the biggest problem with those being latency generated between frames, along with other problems. Will MCM designs overcome this issue, or is this old latency issue just not really relevant anymore? Oh, it's still hugely relevant, if anything more relevant than it used to be. Here's what I'll say. What they're doing with RDNA 3 is not what they did before. And I mean, before Nvidia had professional cards, if I remember correctly, was it Maxwell or Pascal? I'm trying to remember, where Nvidia literally had like 4 cards on one board, and that was for a professional card, and just wasn't an issue for those apps when they programmed for it. But for gaming, it was just always an issue. But what were they really doing? There were a few things there put on the board to help with latency and communication between the dies, but for the most part, guys, they're just, to use Intel, gluing 2 chips onto a board together. There wasn't as much effort put in as RDNA 3 is putting in, not even a tenth the effort, to truly have them operate like one unified chip like Zen does. So I've seen one of the layouts of one of their upcoming products. I won't say which one it is. I haven't been given the okay yet. But what I'm going to say is this is not organized like just a couple chips next to each other. They're going to have radically more infinity cache, probably 512 megabytes, which I said last loose ends already, I think, or last broken silicon. Yeah, I think I've already said that. So probably 512 megabytes, if not 256. There's going to be a tile there for just handling the communication and cache, most likely. And there's really interesting things they're doing with compatibility between various infinity cache and IO chips and different dies. Expect some mixing and matching. And this is something they've been trying to get working for generations. And so they're not doing it until they think it's ready, and they think it's ready. It's going to be seen as one graphics card. It remains to be seen how, and again, it's all about mitigating latency. There will be latency penalties. Anyone who sees the FP32 count or the clock speeds and assumes, whatever. I think people need to start seeing RDNA 3 leaks and going, this is like a Turing to Ampere situation. Ampere doubled CUDA cores, or over doubled, didn't it? Over double? It over doubled CUDA cores over Turing. Did it double performance? No. It was like 50, 55% better, depending on what you look at, So just because AMD has this many more teraflops are not gaming performance. The Ampere is like a third less efficient at converting teraflops to frames, if that makes sense. If I can put it that way for the layman. So I think you should expect maybe a similar ratio with RDNA 3. If it has triple the teraflops, it's probably only double the performance, because there's latency issues. There's IPC losses. But what do you get moving to 5 nanometer? A lot more density. So you pack a bunch of cores, kind of like Ampere, and you put multiple dies. I'm probably going to do a leak being very clear about what I mean soon, but there's a tidbit. And this is probably, if you combine this with what I've already leaked, this is basically all you need to know about RDNA 3. That should basically tell you what the specs are, by the way, if you look around. So I will say though, yes, there will be latency issues. It's all about mitigating, not loot. There will always be more latency, but it's built from the ground up to make the best of the situation. And I think of it, the translation as being kind of Turing to Ampere. All right. Kieran writes in from the tipped questions. I'm not ignoring you. I was waiting to get to RDNA 3, my friend. And he says, hi from down under. So you already have Elden Ring. How lucky. Can you see RDNA 3 or 4 being able to clock higher than 3 gigahertz? I hope AMD won't look down again like, let me see here. I don't want to miss. Ooh, there's been a few questions. Won't lock it down again like RDNA 2. Well, yeah. So are you saying will they lock down Wattman? I don't think so. I don't think they'll lock it down at 3 gigahertz. And they might have done it because there might be some bugs above 3 gigahertz. I've always heard that might have been a thing. Anyways, though, do I think RDNA 3 or 4 will be able to clock higher? I think for some RDNA 3 chips, yes. Some of them. But it's complicated what clock speeds it will hit in the multi-die design. And I guess I just leave it at that. RDNA 4 kind of depends on the node. There's some worry that RDNA 3 may have lower clocks. I'm sorry, there's some worry that TSMC 3 nanometer may have lower clocks than 5 nanometer, but maybe not 4 nanometer. So it depends if it uses 4 or 3 nanometer. And it depends if TSMC 3 nanometer really does get its clock speeds up by the time it comes out. We'll have to see for RDNA 4. For RDNA 3, I think some of them will hit 3 gigahertz. Yes. But it might just be the monolithic ones or something. Let me scroll down. We have some other tips questions. Gleb says, question is in a separate comment line below. Okay. I don't know, Gleb. You kind of just threw that out there. I don't. Maybe he means above. I don't know, Gleb. I didn't see it. I'm sorry. I apologize. Maybe someone else can ask it for me in the Discord or below, and I'll notice it eventually. Vapape writes in, do you think getting Samsung 980 Pro or other good Gen 4 SSDs is a good bet now to future-proof for any new storage tech for gaming? I would just say that it shouldn't just be about gaming, and it's a combination of what's a good deal and what's not. So actually, let me put down a timestamp for this. We'll put this at 5730 Gen 4 SSD shopping. I covered this on the last news Broken Silicon with Dan, where I found a Gen 4 SSD. I'll just put in PS5 because they're all being advertised for PS5. Which one was it? There were one of these was like, it was the XPG one. Yeah. Let me see if the price is what I remember it being. Yeah, so when was that? In 2019, I got a 3950X and a Gen 4 SSD. It was a Sabrent one at 5 gigabytes per second. So 5 gigabytes per second, like a little more than 50% faster than what Gen 3 was capable of at the time. Certainly not as fast as the PS5's SSD. But I got it for 150. And at the time, a maxed out 3.5 gigabyte per second Gen 3 SSD was going for about 100 to 120. And I was like, will I spend 30% more for like 60% more speed for the future proofing? Yes. But I don't just use my system for gaming. I move files. And there are times when I'm editing or moving a large set of files around where I max out the SSD, especially if I'm gaming or rendering while doing something else. I max out my IO all the time in my X570 system with a Gen 4 SSD. So if you're just a gamer, especially if it's a budget build, I don't think there's any problem with just going Gen 3 and maximizing bandwidth with price performance per gigabyte. And remember, you can always upgrade it later to a Gen 4 once they get cheaper. And then they clearly are getting cheaper. Again, there's this XPG Gen 4 SSD here that is 7.4 gigabytes per second / 6.8 gigabytes per second. And it's only $130. So that's $20 cheaper than what I paid a few years ago. It's almost 50%, like 40% faster than what I got. I think this is worth getting if you want some future proofing. I just wouldn't pay for the absolute fastest Gen 4 SSD for gaming because like no games use it yet. And that's a waste. It's really for like, again, this XPG one here, it's $130 for a terabyte. I think that's a decent price for almost top of the line Gen 4. I wouldn't pay more than that though for just gaming. Probably put a link in the description for that so people know that's out there. Let's see. Denvero1G1 writes in, with Linus Tech Tips proving that all AMD CPUs support vendor locking, kicking myself for not testing when I broke a Ryzen Pro story. Do you think do-it-yourself motherboards will eventually come out with it enabled by default? Oh, um, I don't know. Maybe some eventually, on eBay from China or something, because there's like weird motherboards that come out every now and then. I believe there was one that was like a dual socket HEDT motherboard for Intel CPUs that was interesting. And I've seen dual sockets for other ones that are not standard, but I don't know that we'll have standard vendors that work with AMD enable that. I'd kind of doubt it. If AMD doesn't want them to, they won't, you know. Okay, let me continue down. Okay. All right. And now I'm caught up on those and I've covered RDNA 3. So let me continue. So this section, it's in the title of the podcast or the show. I'm going to title this section Intel, Raptor Lake, and Beyond. Because I do want to, I've already talked about that a decent amount, to be honest. But let's get into the notes I have. And again, tip anytime you want, and I'll get to your questions. Let's see here. Beefish writes in, given what we've seen from Alder Lake, do you have any insights on why Intel has doubled down on E-cores for Raptor Lake? It seems like they are focusing on addressing one weakness of the previous architecture without addressing efficiency and performance in lower power applications, and iGPU performance appears stagnant. Well, you have to remember that Intel's still on their same old 10 nanometer node that they used for Ice Lake, Tiger Lake, Alder Lake, and now soon Raptor Lake. I know it's called Intel 7, and I know it's an improved the 10 nanometer they're using right now that they call Intel 7 is a full node better than what Ice Lake had for sure. I'm not saying it's not, but there's still some limitations here and there. And so when you say, oh, they're still using the same iGPU performance, yeah, they're kind of waiting for Meteor Lake. Meteor Lake's going to be the first one to go crazy with an integrated upgrade. And by the way, everyone keeps talking about Arrow Lake integrated graphics. I'm I don't know why. Maybe this is just coming. Oh, let me change the lights to Intel, by the way, for fun. Maybe this is just, people covering what they don't know. What I know is Meteor Lake is going to be a big integrated graphics increase over Raptor Lake. And then Arrow Lake's a big integrated graphics increase over Meteor Lake. So I think they're just kind of waiting for Meteor Lake and they're focusing on what's needed in desktop because especially with Raptor Lake, that's definitely more desktop focused. Alder Lake's for everything, but it's on the same node as Tiger Lake. Tiger Lake, yeah, so Tiger Lake, massively better integrated. Alder Lake mostly focused on the CPU. Raptor Lake's mostly focusing on the CPU on desktop. There will be some mobile, of course. Meteor Lake's going to probably come to mobile first and have a massively better integrated graphics and accelerators and then come to desktop. So addressing that part of your question, Bfish, why is the iGPU performance stagnant? It's just this is what they think they need now. And again, I think AMD thinks this way now, as I've already covered with Rembrandt, but I think Intel thinks of integrated graphics as what do they need? What they have right now in top Alder Lake is pretty close to an MX450, actually. I think when people make fun of the MX450 with Rembrandt, comparing it to Rembrandt, they need to remember how close that i5 was in that leaked benchmark. The i5 only had 80 execution units instead of 96, and it was like 20% weaker or something, 30% weaker than the MX450. And that MX450 was the 25 watt model, not the 15 watt model. I think it's completely conceivable that some mobile Alder Lake systems with the full 96 execution units will have the same graphics performance as a 15 or 10 watt MX450. So Intel thinks that's good enough. No, they're like almost they're like 40, 60, 70% weaker than well, not 70%. They're like 40% weaker than Rembrandt, but they think that's good enough. And then Meteor Lake will probably double that performance or more. And then they'll say that's good enough. And I don't think they're going to push for integrated graphics that go crazy until they can share tiles with PC, which again is a suspicion I've kept saying in Broken Silicons about Arrow Lake. When I see 320, 384 execution units for Arrow Lake, it sounds like what I've heard about might be in the tiles of Battle Mage, guys. think that's a coincidence? Might not be. You know, Arrow Lake may use a Battle Mage tile. I think people need to consider that, and that's when they'll go full steam ahead with the integrated performance. Whether it's Arrow Lake or later. So that addresses that part. Your part about the E cores, B-Fish. Again, this is their strategy. Intel thinks more little cores is the way to go. You just have to remember that right now, the E cores aren't perfectly optimized in software. And there's a reason they have only 8 little cores. A small part of the die of Alder Lake is the little cores for a reason. They don't want to waste too much of the silicon on a aspect of a design that isn't perfected yet, but they want to perfect it by the time Raptor Lake's out. So if it's perfected, perfectly efficient, it works well in games, boom, that's when you double the little cores because it is more efficient with die space if it's perfectly utilized. And they think they don't need more than around 12 or less big cores. It's right now they have 8. And that's just, the way they're doing it, and that's how they plan to do it with tiles. Then once they disaggregate it with Meteor Lake, and then once they get to Lunar Lake or some of the lakes coming after that, which I've heard of some lakes, as I've said, that are not Nova Lake, that have some pretty radical changes coming. That's when they'll completely start over. But right now, what they're doing is what they can with an aging core architecture, B-Fish, that uses a lot of space. They need to use little cores so they don't take up tons of space with the big cores. And it's just not perfected yet. At least that's the way I would explain it and the way I see it. Moving on to another patron question. Brian Steiner writes in, Intel is stating that they are moving up their next CPU launch. Have you been able to confirm whether Zen 4 will release before Rocket Lake? I assume you mean Raptor Lake. Moving up the launch next. I mean, should I Google this? Let me see here. AMD or Intel moving up launch CPU. I don't know. And have they said, like, that's my only question is which one have they said they're moving up? Yeah, I can't find it quickly, so I apologize. But moving up their Raptor Lake launch compared to what? I've already said Q3, late Q3, and late Q3, so what is that? That would then be July, August, September. So does that mean at the end of September or at the end of August? Because the end of August is in the second half of Q3. That wouldn't surprise me, but that's what I expect. And as for Meteor Lake, first half of 2023. So, um, I can I confirm if Zen 4 is coming before that? No, I think it'll be close to it. It seems like people think Raptor Lake was going to launch before Zen 4. Having said that, Zen 4 seems pretty much done. So I don't think there's a reason AMD can't launch before Raptor Lake. I think they're just like, well, a lot of what I've heard is they want DDR5 to be cheap and available, and server comes first. So it's a chicken and egg situation, but I think they might launch Zen 4 early, even if they don't have a lot of supply, just to make sure they have something there for benchmarking next to Raptor Lake. So who's to say what that means for availability at launch? But I think they're going to be close to each other. That's what I would just keep saying. All right. And I know I got some more questions here. Oh, I missed one too. Let me go up and find it. Swirling Dragon Mist says, who makes the best sound card? Oh, I don't know. There's decent Asus ones, decent creative ones, and decent other ones. I haven't shopped for sound cards for a while, so I apologize. What I will say is that I have a motherboard with a built-in, like, basically dedicated Asus sound card, and it works pretty dang well. That's what you kind of look for, is just what are the reviews for the sound cards built into your motherboards, because that's what most people do. But besides that, unfortunately, I have not shopped around on sound cards for a very long time. All right, and let me make sure I don't miss these questions here. All right. Let me just move this back to yellow to a neutral color. LB writes in, do you think Zen 4 is held back by EPYC-friendly chiplet design? N5 opens up efficiency for a 10-core. I'll write this down. It's an interesting question. Zen 4 held back by EPYC. So, do you think Zen 4 is held back by an EPYC-friendly chiplet design? The N5 node opens efficiency for a 10-core dedicated Ryzen chip with plus 70% performance, same die size. I don't know that would act 70% higher performance. I don't know about it depends what you mean by that. But anyways, first of all, AMD's sticking to 8-core chiplets because it's good. They don't think they want more than 8 cores. They think we might as well go to just 3 8-core chiplets, then move to a 10-core chiplet, or go to 16 for like Zen 4C, you know, which I leaked, first for Bergamo. I don't think that the whole 8 versus 10 core thing is having to do with Epic. They're already making 16 cores for Epic and then 8 cores for both consumer and Genoa. So, I mean, for Epic, for Bergamo. So there's no evidence that they're sacrificing that for consumers. And in fact, I think 8 cores is better for consumers. I don't think consumers need more than 16 cores right now. As for holding some things back, the only argument I think I would feel comfortable making for AMD holding back on gamers, for example, in favor of Epic is if they really wanted to, I think they could do a monolithic 8 core or even 10, 12 core with extra cache and then a ton of V cache on it that crushes gaming. They wanted to, instead of only having monolithic designs being APUs, they could really do a monolithic that's all CPU or almost all CPU with like maybe 4 compute units for encoding. They just aren't, you know, and they could. Now they're doing that because how much better would it be than the other chips in the lineup? I don't know. What if it was only 20% better? And they're like, that's just not worth the millions of dollars to design a different chip and then launch it. That's what I imagine they're thinking. But yeah, so I don't think for the most part they're holding much back so much as they're not focusing on some gamer first designs they probably could because there's just not as much money in that, guys. I'm sorry. All right, so I got through that one here. Got a few more patron questions. Let's see. Okay. All right, so I think I got through all the tips questions, and poof, I'm already getting tired here. Let me see here. Mm. Okay, let me write a timestamp down for this. 4 versus 8 cores. So Tadasuka writes in, do you see the majority of new games using 8 cores, 16 threads because of this generation of consoles? Or will games stay with using 4 cores, 8 threads? Games use 8 cores, guys. It's just a matter of how much do they use them, how much effort was put into optimizing them. And just to be clear, a lot of these games that aren't well threaded affect the console's performance too. Like there's been plenty of games where you go, this has way less things on screen. Why does it have frame rate issues? And it's like, oh, they didn't thread it well and it affected the console's performance too. That happens. That's probably some of what's going on with the Series X version of Elden Ring, by the way. So to say it's only affecting PC gamers, this is not true. There's bad ports to consoles and there's bad ports to PC, and it always sucks when that happens. Now, will games focus mostly on 8 cores and give you the middle finger if you have a quad core? Not really. I don't see games requiring, I think games are going to be built moving forward to require probably 6 threads and at least 4 threads, maybe 6 though. I think there's a good argument for 6, right? i3s of 8 threads, older i5s, all the way back to what was it? Coffee Lake had 6 cores, 6 threads. I think there's an argument to be made that game programmers, even the Steam Deck has 8 threads. I think there's an argument to be made that developers should start focusing on at least 6 threads with a focus on being very well optimized for 12 to 16. But if you have a quad core, what quad core is it? Right? Is it a quad core Raptor Lake i3 that clocks at like 5.5 gigahertz? Think of the IPC of that Raptor Lake compared to Zen 2, right? If Zen 3 is like 20, so let's say Alder Lake's like 25% better IPC than Zen 2. Let's just call it 20%, I guess, or something in games. Then Raptor Lake, let's just say it's 10%, 5% better than that. But then it's clocked at 5.5 gigahertz. So I'll even do the math, right? So 5.5 divided by, let's just call it 3.6 gigahertz for the consoles. I mean, you're looking at 53% higher clock speeds. So what? We're looking at like what? Raptor Lake compared to Zen 2. You're looking at 30 to 40% higher IPC and 53% higher clock speeds for that i3. So let me even multiply this by like let's just split the difference 1.35 for games, which I'm lowballing it if anything, guys, to be clear. I'm lowballing it. I'm aware I am. Yeah, so you're looking at double the performance of a Zen 2 quad core if it was the consoles, right? So there you go. There's your answer. So will devs focus on 8 cores? Yes. But if you have a quad core with, 50, just massively higher IPC, let's just say double the single threaded performance, then it's going to perform fine in that game built for 8 Zen 2 cores. I don't see developers requiring more than 8 threads anytime soon. I think if they were really wanted to push it, they'd focus on 6 as the minimum to boot up the game, but that's about it. And so it's all going to be relative. And then think about what comes after Raptor Lake. I think Redwood Cove and Meteor Lake is going to be like another 10 to 20% IPC increase. Zen 5 should be another huge IPC increase over Zen 4. I mean, it's completely conceivable that like a 6-core Meteor Lake will just blow away the consoles and CPU performance. And so the games will run fine. But, the only caveat I'll give you is this. It depends what frame rate they're targeting, because I think they're just going to target, I would call it 60 frames per second averages on the consoles. What that means is if they uncap the frame rate, there'll be areas where you're at 70 to 80 hertz, and there will be rough areas where it drops to 50 hertz. But I think most developers are going to want to keep the minimum frame rates in their console games at 55 or higher almost always. And so if you have a CPU that's, again, this hypothetical 5.5 gigahertz Raptor Lake quad core with 8 threads, I would say that that's going to be very good at probably running above 60, but not 120. And I think a lot of times PC gamers get mad that they're not getting locked 120 hertz in a game when it's like, well, this game was built to run 60 hertz on an 8 core, and you have a 12 core that's not clocked 50% faster. So some of it's optimization for sure, but some of it is also just keep in mind what you're asking. If you have a quad core at 6 gigahertz a year from now, it'll run games fine at 60 hertz. But don't be mad that it maybe doesn't do 120 locked because the consoles have 8 cores. So I dwelled on that one for a while. Hopefully that answers your question. Aiden FS writes in, any insight on planned 5800 X3D launch volume pricing? Will it be a launch volume and pricing? Will it be a small limited launch to say they brought Vcache to the consumer market and then all the dies go to server? I would expect some availability, but not a ton. And pricing, I mean, I don't know. Let me just go to Newegg. I would price the 5800 X3D. Oh God, how would I price it? I mean, what? AMD's shown benchmarks. Let me look that up. You know, I'll even put a timestamp here, right? Because I've been talking long enough. 5800 X3D pricing and volume. So I think it's probably going to come out in about a month, maybe a month and a half, maybe 2 months at most from now. We go to Newegg and then AMD 5800 X3D benchmark. So I'm pretty sure they've already shown off slides of this, have they not? Yeah, so they're comparing it to the i9, which is interesting. And what resolution do we have here? 1080p. That's impressive then if that pans out. So 20% better than the 5900X. It's going to be a tricky one to price. It's going to be tricky because its multi-threading performance is just going to fall short of like the 12700K by a decent amount. I mean, if I was AMD, what they charge, I don't know. I guess we'll see. The one thing I would worry about is that they price it at $500 because you can see the way they're saying this, why they might do that. I'm not saying they should. I'm saying if I look at them comparing it to the 12900K, that kind of telegraphs how they're trying to position it now. And $500 is in between the 5800X and the 5900X. We're going to have to see. At first, because of shortages, the Zen 3 lineup maintained its MSRP. I know Micro Center did deals, Newegg did some limited deals, but it kept selling out on AMD's website. And if I check right now, I think they're all in stock, but I should check. Yeah, they're all in stock. And I have seen falling sales for Zen 3 as Alder Lake becomes better supported, better programmed for. Motherboards become easier to get. What I would say then is if AMD is not making a lot of them, and I don't expect them to make a boatload, honestly, they'll just price it at $500 between the 450 5800X and the $550 5900X. And they'll say, yep, it's in between those prices because it's almost it ties the i9 12900K in gaming. But if they see a lot of decreased sales, then I would expect price drops across the board. I would expect the 5950X to probably become 700, the 5950X to become 450, the 5800X to become 350, and then maybe the 5800X3D to be 400, priced right against the i7. Now, I personally would pick the i7 for the better multi-threading, but I'm a creator, you know, so and the gaming performance is gonna be close anyways, by the way, and God knows this thing can't really overclock much compared to Alder Lake, which can a little bit, so, I don't know. I think that if they don't launch a lot, which I don't expect a ton to be fair, it'll be $500, but if they do sweeping price drops for Zen 3 in preparation for Zen 4, then you're gonna probably see it priced at 400, and if I'm being honest, if AMD actually wanted to be aggressive, they would price drop the 5800X to 300. And then they'd put the 5800X 3D at like 380, the 5900X at like 450, and the 5950X at like 600 or something. But it remains to be seen if they care because I think they're still selling a decent amount. And it's like, how much market share do they really want? You know, like, is it worth making 30% less money to lose 5% less market share? Probably not, so we'll have to see though, but those are generally my thoughts on that processor. All right, let me get to these tipped questions. Some of them have been lingering for a while. Let's see here. Okay, so it's kind of on subject. Saul B writes in and he says the 6X50 XT or RDNA 3 for a Raptor Lake DDR4 build. I mean, if RDNA 3 is any decent availability, you go for RDNA 3 because it's going to be better. But I will say this. Yeah, let me put in a timestamp here because I think this is something I do want to say. 22 6X50 XT thoughts. As always, the 6650 XT, the 6750 XT, it's all going to come. 6950 XT, I'm going to kind of ignore because it's like, whatever. It's a 3090 Ti competitor. Who cares? No one. Oh, it's not for me. Whatever. I think that people are underestimating how good these Navi 23 and Navi 22 refreshed cards could be at the right price, but it's going to come down to the right price. If I go to, I'm actually going to check Micro Center because Newegg's just almost always overpriced. So let me just check what Micro Center's 6600 XT pricing is. Yeah, it's still $500 for the 6600 XT. What about the RX 6600? At Micro Center, let's see. It's getting down to, it's still not really to 400 yet. It's like 430. Okay. So that's when it becomes hard because I think if they really push the 6600, the 6650 XT, so that is the overclocked faster RAM 6600 XT version, they push that really hard. If they squeeze 10% out in 1080p, I think it can match the 3060 Ti. Look it up. Go look at reviews. I think people, may misremember where that could go. If if it's 10% stronger, I'll even put a link in the description, right? RX60, because I don't, I know people are gonna, there will be some people that won't believe me. Uh, but if I actually go down here, despite people panning it, which I thought was interesting when you can't even buy the Nvidia cards that it's competing with. Let me see here. Where is the summary? There it is. So if I look at the 1080p summary, if I added 10% more performance to a 6600 XT, it matches the 3060 Ti. So it's all going to come down to price then, right? And even in 1440p, it would only be, it would only be like 7% weaker. So That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? The die is, two-thirds the size of GA104 that's used for the 3060 Ti, and God knows Nvidia isn't making like any 3060 Ti's, relatively speaking. If AMD could launch a 6650 XT that trades blows with a 3060 Ti, maybe isn't quite as good. You would, if they were the same price, you'd choose the 3060 Ti, but then they put it at like $400. I think that's interesting when you can't get a 3060 Ti for MSRP, but that's the question. Are they going to give it a $400 MSRP? It's all going to hinge on if the 6600 XT's street price is drifting towards its MSRP of 380. They might even give it no MSRP. And I don't know then. At that point, then you go, well, then you choose this over a 3060 Ti if it's like 20% cheaper. But if it's the same price, you choose a 3060 Ti. But again, it's worth pointing out because it can and should be decently cheaper than the 3060 Ti on the street because it uses a die that's significantly smaller and it brings similar performance. So I think that's an interesting card. And the same with the 6700 XT, which I will put this link in the description too from Hardware Unboxed. If you added 10% performance to a 6700 XT, it's within 5% of a 3070 Ti, and it has less RAM. So that helps with current RAM pricing. At that point you go, huh, almost a 3070 Ti, but 50% more RAM, and maybe it costs 500 instead of like $800 or $1,000, whatever the 3070 Ti goes for now. I think that's interesting, but it's all going to come down to price. And so your question, which I've been talking for a while, Saul B, about, which one for a Raptor like DDR4 build, that depends on the performance pricing and when you get it. If you wait, RDNA 3 will be out and availability should have improved by then. But if you can't wait when you're in 1080p, I kind of feel like a 6650 XT would be just a 3060 Ti for less money, and way less power consumption if you care about that. Christopher Coda writes in, 12 plus 4 power requirements for RDNA 3. New DDR5 for ramp. Well, DDR5 availability and pricing should get a lot better in like by Q4. Well, depending on how server shipments go. As for the power requirements for RDNA 3, I mean, I think AMD is planning to at a minimum target 400 watts for the top card. So I guess I'll just say that, and that should answer your question. If it uses a 12 pin, I don't know. I mean, because then, then you'd want 3 8 pins then if you don't have a 12 pin. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know what AMD thinks about using the 12 pins. I haven't heard them really like it very much, but if power usage keeps going up, they might as well use it. Aaron Jackson writes in, no question, just a thank you. Have a couple beers with Dan on me and have a great weekend gaming. We will, but remember, we're recording Broken Silicon, so we won't just be gaming. But yes, thank you for the tip. Okay. Close that. Let us see here. Yep, I've gotten to that question. So I've gotten to all those questions. So again, keep tipping. Remember to hit the like button, everybody. We have almost 800 people watching. Hopefully we can get 800 likes. And remember, click the link in the description. Hopefully all of you watching, even if you don't go to Micro Center, clicking the link in the description helps this channel. And again, I think you can get a i7 12700K for $300 and then get a motherboard $20 off with it. It's a ridiculously good deal. So I think it's worth doing anyways. But yeah, remember that going to that link in the description helps me. Let me move on. I do have another set of reader mails here about Intel Alchemist, and we've been going for almost an hour and a half, and I actually have a die shrink to record for patrons after this with Dan. So let me just tell Dan to message me when he's ready. 30 minutes from being ready. Okay. All right. But yeah, let me continue. So Intel Alchemist, I do have some questions, of course, about this. Alexander writes in, what generation do you think you'll have something with double the performance of a 1080 Ti for $500? So I kind of butchered reading that, but he's asking, when are we going to have a $500 card twice as strong as the 1080 Ti? Links in the description. If you look it up, double the performance of a 1080 Ti is about the performance of a 3090. So basically, when will 3090 performance be $500? I think quite possibly with Lovelace and RDNA 3. I mean, if you think about it, even just from Nvidia's perspective, I know people are all no, I'm not reading that. Let's see, is someone just wrote in French for me to say that like French is great and that it's a complex one and that I no. Not saying that in French, my friend. I do speak some French, but sorry, I got off subject there. Um, if you think about I know people right now are busy just debating. Oh, is RDNA 3 better than Lovelace? If RDNA 3 beats Lovelace, what does that mean for Lovelace? Well, Lovelace is still going to be a huge performance uplift, guys. Like at least is better than Ampere over Turing, and I think minimum at a minimum, I will say this, at a minimum, Lovelace will be like Maxwell to Pascal. So if you think about it, then where's the 3090, right? Where's the 3070? The 3070 matches the 2080 Ti. The 1070 narrowly beat the Titan X Maxwell, right? The Titan Maxwell. So if the Pascal generation had a 1070 that beat the previous Titan and the 3070 is pretty close to the Titan RTX, I think that it's completely feasible that the 4070 will be stronger than a 3090. Will that be $500? Yeah, I would kind of doubt that. That's the problem. But I would say there's a good chance there's a $500 card close to double the performance, at least of the 1080 Ti. And by RDNA 4, yeah, I think so for sure. So if you're holding on to a 1080 Ti, and I know a lot of people still are, and you're waiting for something that doubles your performance and like adds good ray tracing at the same or similar power consumption, I'd say near the end of the year, you might be good. Okay. So that really wasn't an art question, but I think it kind of leads into it. Joaquim Hagen writes in, he says, "Hi, my favorite tech tuber." Oh, thank you, Joaquim. "Do you think Intel's Arc can have as high clock speeds as AMD? Probably not. So far, I've seen benchmarks at 2.4 gigahertz. If not, can it be that they need a generation of GPUs to learn something? Well, it has to do with hard designs on 6 nanometer too. But RDNA 1 had clocks around 2.4, RDNA around 2, RDNA 2 got close to 3. Or to phrase it differently, which you spelled phrasing in a really weird way, Joaquim, I'm just being honest here. Do you think Intel can surprise us with more performance than the benchmarks led us to believe? What is the benchmarks leading us to believe? Um, I think that the mid-range is gonna be about a 36 between a 3060 and 3060 Ti. I think their top end will be around a 3070 or 3070 Ti, and that's that. Um, and I've been reporting it's funny that we see 2.4 gigahertz. Yeah, I've been reporting that, but you don't know which I know people think they know what's being benchmarked, but it's like, guys, do you not think Intel knows how benchmarks leak? Do you think it's the same with AMD when everyone was saying there's a 384-bit RDNA 2 or RDNA 2 could barely beat a 3070? Do you think these companies are not aware of how things leak and they may plant bullshit leaks? Like, I just don't get it. Do you think they don't know who's talking to who most of the time? Um, do I own AMD stock? No. Um, I try to stay away from owning it. Every now and then I'll own Intel, Nvidia, AMD, but I'm not long any of them all the time to try to stay unbiased. I don't own any of it right now. Let's put it that way. Sorry, off subject. But, I think if you look at my leaks, I've been saying Alchemist can hit above 2.2, 2.3 gigahertz for a while. And I think 2.5 gigahertz is probably doable. I have heard they could maybe hit 2.6, 2.7 on a special edition. I just don't know if they're actually going to bother to launch that. And that's about it. That's about all I have to say. Do I think they'll hit 2.8, 2.9 gigahertz? No, I haven't seen any reports ever that suggested that. Get away from there. So I have another Alchemist question here. Let's see. Right. I like this question a lot. "Hey, Tom. First off, thanks for keeping up the guest variety on Broken Silicon. I really dug the esports manager episode. Yeah, a lot of people didn't expect it to be a lot of people love that who listened to it. Check that out, guys. But anyways, put your marketing hat on. If you were Intel, how would you handle the long delayed ARC dedicated GPU pre-release media blowout? Would you stick with the memed infomercial style presentations from CES? What would you show gamers to convince them to hold out for high-end ARC over a 6750 XT?" You know, at the end of the day, it's such a new product that I think it doesn't matter as much. And I don't think the like over the top advertising has gotten them anything good. And I don't think the over the top advertising got AMD, the poor Volta bullshit. That didn't help AMD at all. So, what would I do if I was Intel? I mean, I wouldn't do a lot until we're ready to launch. And I think they're already stupid in how they're marketing this stuff. But see. Like I would wait until we're 100% sure how it performs, and then I would, just be honest and price it aggressively. That's all they can do. And they're going to have to because RDNA 3 isn't that far away. And then once they're sure how it performs, once they're sure of the aggressive pricing, I would get it out there and then I just put Intel ads everywhere and I'd focus on the brand, right? That's what I think Intel needs to focus on. People know the name Intel. Like I mentioned that before, that if I tell people, if I go on a date and with a woman and she doesn't know what I really do, and I'm like, I analyze like hardware of semiconductor companies. If I mention AMD, there's a chance she'll know what I'm talking about on average. If I mention Nvidia, there's an okay chance. If I mention Intel, always, oh, you talk about Intel stuff. Intel has real brand name recognition. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't say anything if I was Intel. Then I'd be sure of what we're going to launch, price it aggressively, be very honest about its performance, and then just use the name because that's their best asset. But all of this like weird marketing with like I don't like what they've been doing so far for the most part. So see people talking in the what is it? Oh, did I miss a question here? Nope. See people talking in the chat. Don't forget, if you have a question, I will answer it if it's tipped, but I'm still getting through the patron one, so they come first. Abik Gululati writes in, hi, Tom. What do you think about the rising costs of motherboards? Back when Ryzen 1000 came out in 2017. Oh, I like this question. Let me put a timestamp. Sorry. My voice is falling apart a little bit. Let me see here. Motherboard pricing. I see someone in the comments says 4K waste pixels, ultra waste pixels. I can run 4K on my 3070, no problem, friend. You know what waste pixels? A lot of things. Running the resolution higher than the settings or running the settings higher than the resolution. Both waste pixels. Anyways, here. Sorry, I just always have to say that. Let's see. Abika Gulati writes in, hi, Tom. What do you think about the rising cost of motherboards? Back when Ryzen 1000 came out in 2017, I bought an Aorus X370K7, which was at the time amongst the highest end AM4 boards, and it cost just $220. It also came with really all the features you'd expect from a high-end board. Dual BIOS, selector switches for dual BIOS, several functional buttons on the motherboard, freaking postcode for troubleshooting, and even a little hole in the CPU socket, enabling you to send in a K-type temperature probe. Nowadays, though, motherboards that sell for 200 are often considered low end. I don't agree with that at all. I'm sorry, Abik, I don't agree. I think that people just always want to feel like they have the highest end. Do I think the top end motherboards are $200 right now? No. Are they low end? No. No, you can't say they're low end. There's plenty of decent X670, $200, $220 motherboards. They're just not the top. And the reason the top end of motherboards keeps getting more expensive is because some people buy them, but they're unnecessary. You don't need 100 power phases, guys. Like you don't need a freaking LCD showing you the temperature on there. The reason those prices are going up is because people buy them. And I get it. If you can spend an extra $50, what are you spending for your PC? $1,500. So what, you spend an extra $50 to make it look cool? Why not? I get why people do that, but that's just not true that low end is at $200. There's plenty of good B550 motherboards at $100. It's just not true. There's just not a ceiling anymore. Continuing his question though, and on the newest platform, Z690 sub 250 gets you bad boards in general. Yeah, I don't agree. I got a decent board for under 250. I understand that VRMs need to be more beefy. No, they don't. The VRMs are getting ridiculous. Listen to the tech consultant Broken Silicon. He it specializes in what goes into making motherboards and the costs of them, and he thinks that they're way over engineered at this point. But he says, but $400 being the standard for good boards feels ridiculous. Well, it's not the standard. It only nets you so-called mid-range boards in general. The mid-range is not $400. It's just not true. I'm sorry. This is really bothering me. I don't know if I can finish this. Do you see this trend spreading to AM5, and how do you see it evolving overall? We keep talking of rising GPU prices, but motherboards are really entering ridiculous territory every day. As long as these companies can make a flagship $400 board and a bunch of people buy it, they're going to keep doing it, right? But like I'll admit I spent $400 for a high-end board in 2018, but it came with a sound card that was in a slot. Like, it actually came with a full sound card, and it was a compact board that fit in a smaller case. So I paid a premium to get like the equivalent of like an $80 sound card and high-end components in a and built-in high, top-of-the-line Wi-Fi in a compact form factor. You remove the top end Wi-Fi, you remove the sound card, and you get to a motherboard that's like under 250, but it's like premium because it's in a small case. I don't know, and it supports a 16 core processor. I don't Prices are up compared to where they used to be, but processors in mainstream are also way better than they used to be, and the quality is substantially higher. There's color coding. Go back to any motherboard in like the early 2000s, and they're like brown and light orange. They're ugly. Now, does having a motherboard be brown or light orange mean that it's low quality? No, but it costs money to color code, and PC gamers have told Asus, bling, more bling, put crystals on Intel's HEDT lineup. Remember that with like Cascade Lake X or whatever it was, or was it Cascade Lake X? Or yeah, I think so, where they just had like crystals all over their motherboards. How does that help performance? It doesn't, but people pay for it. So I don't know. A lot of this is just the overall blingification of PC gaming, and it'll stop when people stop buying it. But at the end of the day, I think like your B550, your B660 for Alder Lake, there's plenty of high quality B660 motherboards with more IO than you used to have for a mid-range board, and they're like 120, 140. So all I can say is I don't know that 120 is a bad price for a motherboard that has those features. It's more than before, but it's not like it's double the price. You don't need to buy the $400 motherboard. And it's a little more expensive because everything's more expensive, guys. Inflation exists. I don't know what to tell you, you know. Um, Let me see here. Omar Matiati writes in. I hope I said that right. My gosh. There are YouTubers. Oh, so here we go with an ARC one. I don't know if I should even put a timestamp for this. How far have I been talking here? Let's see. Arc equals 57. So Omar writes in, there are YouTubers stating that this generation of ARC cards will perform around a 5700 XT. How likely is this? As I'm looking forward to trying out their top tier, I was hoping for 3070 Ti area performance. All that can ever be confirmed for sure before the drivers are done is that Alchemist is targeting the 3070 Ti. Always has been, always will be. I've seen benchmarks where it trades blows with a 3080. Do I think it will? No. But that's what you've got to understand is all of these random benchmarks. Guys, I've seen benchmarks where it loses to a 3060. I What? Like, what am I going to do, a leak every time I see it? These are all engineering samples. Having access to one engineering sample is not that useful. Again, unless you think one benchmark proves Navi 21 is going to lose to a 3070, which a lot of people doubled down on. I mean, how many people have leaked pictures of ARC now? They're all over in test centers, and they tend to perform, as I keep saying, between like a 3060 and a 3070 Ti, with most of the samples being around a 3070 in the games where the drivers are optimized. I think, again, like I said earlier in this, people are going to have to remember that at launch, you know, there may be a couple games where it underperforms and a couple games where they point to and they're like, oh, look how good it is. You know, do I think, you know, I think it's worth pointing out how close these products are, because this is actually something that I think people easily lose sight of. So if I go to Tech Power Up and I look at the 5700 XT, how far is that even away from a 3060 Ti or something? Yeah, so a 5700 XT A 3060 Ti is like 20% better than that, 25% better depending on the resolution. It's not as far away from a 3070 as you'd think, actually, which is kind of funny to realize. Actually, wow, this chart really overestimates the 3070, though. That's weird. Way overestimates it. But yeah, so like a 6700 XT, you know, is how much better than a 5700 XT? I think it was generally speaking 25 to 30%. So that's within range of a bunch of engineering samples, and that's really all I can say. I'm not going to start reporting final performance probably for another month because I've seen so many different variances, and all I can report is universally they want to hit a 3070, and it will not lose to a 3060. So that's it. We're going to have to see. But let me see here. I mean, God, how many samples of like Zen 2 where it was like one was around 5 gigahertz, one was around 4 gigahertz? Truth was in the middle. Wilson69 writes in, "Hi, Tom. What do you make of the Newegg and Gamers Nexus drama? Do you think retailers should be doing a better job when it comes to product returns for high cost electronics? Or perhaps the community is being a bit unfair to Newegg? Thank you." So let me put this here. Timestamp 4550. Newegg Gamers Nexus drama. Let's just call it that. To be honest, I haven't paid attention to this too much, but Dan explained it to me, and it basically seemed to sound like, for the most part, Newegg's just operating as usual, but they have a tendency to just reject returns. So like you asked, do you think retailers should be doing a better job when it comes to product returns for high cost electronics? I mean, look, Amazon basically has a no fuss 30-day return policy here. Um, I think that should be standard. To be entirely fair, though, um, I haven't bought in much from Newegg recently, but like a few years ago when I bought things from them, one of the things I had to return within 30 days. Oh, yeah, that happened with like a 480 that broke after I got it. It was technically like a 470 clocked at a 480s clock speed, and it broke within 20 days when I had it. And then I saw Furies were going on sale for like $200-300, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna return this and get a Fury. And they accepted my return and gave me a full refund. So all I can say is, in my experience, they've given me my money back in 30 days. But if they're not, that's bad. Are people being unfair to Newegg? Not if they're rejecting returns that were their fault. And I don't know if it's fair to say that we should expect everyone to act like Amazon, who's a mega company and can just eat the cost of constant 30-day returns. But I also think that a 30-day return should be pretty much standard. So that's what I say. Brett Summers writes in, "Hey, Tom, this isn't exactly a reader mail, but I just want to say thank you for the content as always. Your game developer and artist episodes have inspired me to go from being a self taught to being enrolled in game design and development courses." Oh, it's awesome. So thank you a lot, man. I appreciate the motivation you provided me. Yeah, and we're going to have more developers coming on soon. I've got a couple reaching out to me. I got a pre-built person. I got a CEO for a company that's a small company, very small, considering coming on. I want to have NX Gamer on again soon. I'm just trying to time it correctly with Xbox and PlayStation news. Yeah, I mean, and I want to have more game developers on. Definitely don't miss those episodes. I think the Brian Heemskirk and the Obsidian developer were really, really good. All of them were good, though, I'd say in general, and give insight into this industry. And then the one of the former devs is there was another dev that was unanimous, but was for one of the major big ones, someone like EA. That was interesting too. Oh, F name in name writes, and the problem wasn't rejecting returns. The problem was they sold a labeled part as broken and then sold it. Well, what is there to say about that? That's not good. Do I think people are being too hard on Newegg if they're doing that repeatedly? No, I think that's bullshit. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm glad Gamers Nexus is hitting them hard, and I have nothing to say besides that's wrong, you know. All right, so I think I got all the tipped questions. I got through all the Patreon questions that were submitted before. Let's see. Okay, so let me put this link here. Oh, there we go. All right. So, are there any more questions then? I'm probably going to stop pretty soon. Let's see. When do I need to get on with Dan for the podcast? But and this goes for patrons in the Discord as well. Ask a free question right now. Yeah, someone says Cam's a tad flashy. I know. There's nothing I can do once you start a stream. Unfortunately, YouTube kind of locks you in. No, I don't refresh the Patreon page. I wait for you to post in the Discord while I'm live. Although I guess I can check it just to be fair. Do you think Nvidia will remove LHR if GPU sales go down? That's a good question. Let me put a timestamp there. Oh boy. Will Nvidia remove LHR? Um, I think the way I would phrase it is it's already broken, and Nvidia will always want a way to sell graphics cards to miners. So whether they remove LHR or not, whether Lovelace has LHR or not, it's a joke either way. The question is how bad it would look if they like literally released a patch killing LHR. It'd probably look pretty bad. Um, so do I think they will? Maybe not officially. I don't know. I wouldn't rule it out though. Maxwell Engel writes in, have I covered the questions for ARC 7000 versus 4000, RTX 4000? Yes. Akarsh Idieto writes in from the Patreon. He says, I'm tired of seeing bad PC ports. You pay $1,500 to $2,500 for your PC, then to only sit and diagnose performance issues all the time. I like PC gaming, but I hope PC ports get better. I mean, look, ma'am, I don't know what to tell you. And again, there are bad ports to consoles too. Like I forgot Watch Dogs Legion was a horrible console port. Like it didn't necessarily run great on everyone's PC, but they really did consoles dirty with that one. Like, it was same with Dying Light 2, runs like shit on consoles. So all I can say, Akarsh, is it's not just PC gamers. There are shitty ports on all platforms, and it sucks when it happens. Um, you know, what's the solution? I don't know. I think, someone says Cyberpunk. Well, yeah, I mean, that goes without saying, I think. Cyberpunk was, of course, a bad console port. We all know that. That's the gold standard of bad ports of anything. But I don't know. It just sucks. I don't know. I don't know what there is to say about these ports. I know that I've heard that within Sony, bought Nexus to help with these ports, and Sony wants the ports to get better. I actually didn't hear the God of War port was that bad. If it ran bad on your system, I'm sorry. I didn't hear it was nearly as bad as like Horizon at launch, though. And I know Sony's trying to improve it, though. Um, Yeah, I mean, yeah, that Jillian says that they're well ported on PC. Yeah, I know Horizon had a rough. I actually heard God of War had a good port to PC, but I expect some of their. I think their Uncharted one had a pretty good port too, if I remember correctly. You know, they're not all bad ports, and if you're tired of them, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It sucks when there's bad ports. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions right now. Let me see. I'll go for another 5 minutes unless we get a huge stream of more questions. With MCM, do you think they'll try low power CPU chips on a GPU? Oh, I think they'll try all different types of things, but more likely, of course, is putting one of those chips on a CPU. Max Engel says, is this going to be posted? Why wouldn't it be? Is this going to be posted? Yeah, it's posted right now. Who wouldn't post their videos that they're doing? Ali Muhadin writes in, I'll cover this. I'm actually surprised there weren't more people asking this. And I want to avoid talking about it in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord because, when it comes to political discussions, I don't see why everything has to involve everything. If you want to talk about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has really been going on for 8 years, you don't have to talk about it in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord. We are there to talk about gaming hardware. We'll talk about it when it applies to it, and it does a little bit, but that's the thing I always just don't get is it's like, why can't we talk about this here? I don't know. There's a huge internet. Talk about it some years. Talk about it somewhere else on the internet. But, will the invasion of Ukraine or the enhanced invasion of Ukraine affect chip shortages? Well, I think the biggest thing is it's going to affect oil prices. And what is oil used for? Everything. Cars, boats, plastic, everything. So if oil prices go up because everything is shipped, everything goes up a little bit. Now, is it gonna be enough to make it so prices start going back up for graphics cards again? I kinda doubt it actually, but, there's gonna be some more disruptions because of this, and that's really all there is to say, and, I think people are underestimating how much people are going to look back on this invasion as a turning point that set a whole new era in history here. Like, there's a lot going on with the politics between this, China's support of it, what Europe thinks of China's support of it, not happy about it. I think people are underestimating how many ramifications there will be, not just for Russia, but for any tepid support China gives to this. Well, Europe doesn't like that. So that I'm not going to, and again, I'm not passing any judgments or I'm just saying like, this isn't just limited to Ukraine. There's going to be a lot of countries reevaluating how they want to trade with other countries, not just Russia right now. And so, will we get immediate impacts as bad as they could be? I don't know. But I do think some people are vastly underestimating like the long-term effects of what this will mean for trade between a lot of different countries. And in the short term, oil prices are up. Again, oil is used to ship everything across the world, which means shipping costs go up for everything, prices go up for everything. Would a rumored TGP of 800 watts, wouldn't it be like 500 to 600 watts? Actually, look, guys, again, 800 watts is not what the sustained gaming. No, maybe for data center. Can I do a backflip? Theoretically, probably. If I tried to do one right now, I would hurt myself as I never do backflips. Can I do a backflip? The short answer is definitely no, I cannot. Not to my knowledge. I haven't tried, and I'm not going to because I don't want to injure myself. I recall you speculating a long time ago that RDNA 3 and Lovelace might start with a low end mid range cards. Do you think that might be the case? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it would make a lot of sense why AMD would with like their monolithic 6 nanometer, what is it, Navi 33, and Lovelace might to put out their low end card first as well. Yeah. I think there's a possibility. Ugh. Have I seen LHR is broken already? Yeah. We're going to cancel it. We're going to cover it on Broken Silicon. We're not going to cancel it, unfortunately, but we will be covering it. A financial podcaster said the only place an invasion is happening is in US media. Well, that's not. There's missiles hitting buildings. I think there's a lot of people that said this was a trumped up warmongering are wrong. The invasion happened, guys. All right. Last question here from a patron. Evil Steve, Software Box writes in. And he says, do you think that pure rasterization performance is enough to take market share and mind share away from NVIDIA? No. But I think they're going to have more than doubling of ray tracing for RDNA 3. I feel like AMD needs to consider marketing war they're going to have to go through. I agree. And they're going to bury them by marketing DLSS 3.0 as the future of gaming. Yes, absolutely. I think Nvidia is going to try to make Lovelace look stronger no matter what. That's going to involve ray tracing potentially and DLSS 3.0. And that's why FSR 2.0 has to be ready when RDNA 3 launches, but I think it will. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, and I try to stop before we hit the 2-hour mark. So again, sorry for the flickering. It happens sometimes on YouTube. I'm always trying to isolate the things that can contribute to this. It's been way worse in the past, so this is at least not the worst I've seen. And click the link in the description, guys. It really, really helps the channel. Go to Micro Center, get CPUs for less. Either way, it helps me. And have a good weekend.